Hello everybody and welcome back to another video in our web development series. In this lesson, we're going to go over the CSS position property as well as the Z-Index or the Z-Index if you're American. So let's go ahead and jump right on into that. This is just our boilerplate template code here. And I'm just going to give that a name, position and Z-Index. And now inside of here, I'm just going to generate 4 divs, and I can do that shorthand. I can say dot and then div. This is going to be the class name. If I do a $sign there, that's going to represent the number. And then if I do an asterisk 4, now you can see I have 4 divs there. And inside of here, I'm just going to give them all some text. So div, and then each one of them, this will just be 1, 2, 3, 4. Go ahead and save that. Now you can see over here, we've got div 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's give those a little bit of styles. And you can see we have the classes 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to come, actually, we need to go ahead and link our styles.css. So I can say link CSS. And now save that, come on into here, and we can say dot box. Actually, every div that we have, we can go ahead and give a size to it. So I can say height is going to be 100 pixels, and then width is going to also be 100 pixels. And we'll give each one of these a border, 2 pixels, solid black. And then finally, I'll give each one some padding and margin. So padding, 4 pixels, and then margin, again, we can do 4 pixels on that one. And if I hit save now, you can see we've got div 1, 2, 3, and 4. We can style each of these divs individually as well. So if I say div 1, I can give that a background color. We'll just do red. Now I can copy this by holding Shift-Alt and hitting the down arrow 1, 2, 3 more times. And then for each one of these, that's going to be div 2, div 3, div 4. And we're going to do red, green, blue, and then, I don't care, purple for the last one. So if I save it, now you can see we've got our red box, our green box, our blue box, and then our purple box. And if you've been playing around with the CSS properties up to this point, you may have noticed there's a top that we can put some measurement in here. So if I say maybe top 50 pixels, now this typically means that this is going to be 50 pixels from the top, but you can see I save it and it does nothing. And then also down here, if I say there's a right and there's also a left. So if I say left and say maybe 75 pixels, well, you would think that that should mean that we're going to now be 75 pixels from the left of our screen. But this div, you can see, hasn't moved at all. So the reason for that is because there's a couple different position property values that you can set. And if we haven't set our position property, it's going to default to static position. And the static position essentially means that this top, left, right, and then bottom properties, these values, we can put whatever we want in there, and it's never going to change an item that's in a static position. So if I come up here and say position static, which is default, and I say that nothing changes, but if I change this to relative and then save that, you can see now my item has shifted to the right by 75 pixels, meaning it's moved away from the left by 75 pixels and then down away from the top by 50 pixels. So what the relative position does is it allows you to position this item with this left, right, top, and bottom values. It allows you to use those values to position the item relative to where it would have been. So if I take these two out, you can see it goes right back. And then if I add them back in again, it moves relative to where it was. Now there's a couple other values that you can put in here for position. You've got relative, you also have fixed. So if I save that, now you see it didn't leave any room where it was initially, where when I had that in when I had that in the relative position, it left a blank spot for box 1 and then moved it relative to where it was. Now that I have that in fixed, it didn't leave any room, and it moved it still to the left by 75 and then down by 50, but there's one big difference here. Obviously the first difference, it didn't leave room for it, but the second difference is if I scroll down, which I can't do right now because our viewport's not big enough. So if I expand our viewport, so in the body tag, I'll just give this a height, and we can say maybe 200% view height. Now I've got a scroll bar, and if I scroll down, you can see that this div, div 1, which has my fixed position, is now in this position no matter where I am on the screen. So everything else I can scroll, and this one stays right there. Now you'll see this oftentimes if I set bottom to 0. If I set bottom to 0, and then if I set right also to 0, we got to put units on both of those. Now if I save that, you can see I have this div down in my bottom right corner. And you'll see this quite a bit, like if you log onto a site and there's like a help AI chat that pops up or something like that, or maybe even on a lot of emails, if you just have a pop-up in the bottom right corner to open an email, you'll be able to scroll through and read it while you still have that item fixed. So that is what your fixed position does. It essentially allows you to hold your location on the screen no matter where you are in your scroll. And then the next one, we've got one called sticky. So sticky position here, if I set the top to 0 pixels and then go ahead and save that, you'll see now I've got all of my items here. Again, we're 75 from the left because we didn't take that out, and we're back at the top. But the difference now is if I scroll here, you can see it doesn't move until I hit the top of this box. After that, it moves. So let me just maybe add a little more space here so that you can see that better. So margin 30 pixels, save that. Now you'll see until we hit the box, nothing happens. So I can scroll from the top, and once I hit the box is then carried down with the scroll. And then when I go back to the top, the box hits where it was, and then I can keep scrolling as the box is left behind. So you'll see sticky positioning used a lot for like a menu bar. And the last position value we need to talk about is called absolute. So basically, if I save that, you'll see now I get my 75 pixels on the left, and even here I'll just set it to what it was before so it matches. Take away that margin, and there you go. You can see I get my 50 pixels on the top and I get my 75 on the left, but you'll notice no space was left for it, and that's because when you position an element using absolute, then basically it's taken out of the flow, the normal flow of the document, which means it's not going to affect the layout of any other items on the screen. And if I scroll now, you can see that it no longer is stuck to the top. It actually stays exactly where it was inside the document, but this div 1, because its absolute position, is no longer affecting the layout of the other items. Now, this raises another interesting question, which is now you've got div 1, div 2, and div 3, and they're overlapping, right? And we've got div 1 is showing up on top, and then div 2 and 3 are showing up after that. So how can we change that? Let's say we wanted div 3 to be on top of div 1. How could we make that happen? Well, that's basically what we can change with our Z-Index. Now, if you remember back to math class, you had your XY coordinate plane. X was horizontal and then Y was vertical. And then if you made it into the more advanced math classes, like maybe Calculus 3, you end up doing math now in 3 dimensions instead of 2, and you get your X, Y, and your Z axis. And the Z axis is the one coming up perpendicular to the XY axis. So basically, that's going to be in programming and in CSS here, Z-index is going to be where your elements are layered on the screen. So the higher the Z-index, the higher that element, meaning anything with a Z-index lower is going to be not visible on top of it. So if I were to come into div1 and I say, hey, I want this to be low, well, I can say, well, Z-index is equal to 0. And then if I save that, you'll see nothing happens. And the reason nothing happened is because my Z-index might be set to 0, but none of the others are actually set. So because this is the only one with a Z-index set, it's still going to put 0 on top. But if I wanted maybe div3 to come up on top of div1, what I could do is I could come down to my div3 block, and in here I could say my Z-index is now going to be 1. And now, if I go ahead and hit save on that, you'll notice nothing actually changes. And the reason, of course, is because even though we have a higher Z-index on div3, div1 has a position absolute, whereas div3, it's not listed here, but it's got the default position, which is going to be position static. So we don't want this to have a static position, and then div1 to have an absolute position if we're trying to put div3 on, if we're trying to put div3 on top of div1. So what I can do here is, instead of static, if I change that now to relative or absolute, but I'll just do relative here, and then hit save, now you can see div3 shows up on top of div1. So that's cool. Basically, however high we put the Z-index, it's going to determine what layer this item goes on here. But what if I were to come back into my index, and now inside of div3, let's just say that I also have a box inside of here. So div dot, we'll say inner div, and then hit enter on that. Now let's go ahead and give this inner div some formatting. So if I come back to my styles, and down here I can say inner div, and then inside of here maybe we'll have a height of 75 pixels, and then we'll have a width of, again, 75 pixels. And let's go ahead and give that one a background color of aqua. I don't care, it doesn't really matter. And go ahead and save that. Now you can see I've got my aqua box right inside of the blue, and I've got the red one under. So what if I change my Z-index on the red one to 2, save. Now you can see the red one is on top of the blue one and the teal one. Now what if I were to come into this inner div, or sorry, the aqua one? What if I come into the aqua one and I change the Z-index to something higher than red, maybe 3? Now if I save that, you'll notice even though this inner div has a higher Z-index than this div, it still shows up underneath the red one, because this inner div, his parent, div3, has a Z-index that's lower than the red one. So you can't have a child element in HTML. You cannot have a child element on top of an item that's on top of its parent item. Hopefully that all makes sense to you. If not, definitely go back, review this video, and then check out the reference material that I'm going to put down in the video description as well. Make sure to practice this stuff and really try to understand it, because you're going to need to understand this going forward. And then like and subscribe, leave a comment below telling us what you think, and we will see you all in the next video.